All right, like I said, this meeting will be recorded, so feel free to turn your cameras on or off as you like. Say hello in the chat. If you have a question, submit it at that bit.ly/askopendata, which should be in the chat as well. Moving on, so who are we? We're BetaNYC. I'm joined by my colleague, Noel Hidalgo.
Hello.
And Z.
Hello.
And Inej.
Hello.
And we're also joined today by a special NYC Open Data guest, Zachary Fader from the NYC Open Data program. He manages the program over there at the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics.
Hello.
And a quick thank you to Craig and Councilmember Holden's office for helping us co-host these sessions with Council. They've been a great success so far, and we appreciate your help in bringing staff to the room. We love teaching Council about open data. So hey, Craig, thank you.
You're most welcome. It's been great so far.
Awesome. All right. Well, so this is a small group. What do you all think? Should we break out into 2 groups, or do we want to just say hello, why we're here, and what our open data sets are?
Let's do it all together.
Okay, cool. So quickly, we'll go around the room. We'll start with Inej. Who you are, why you're here, and what is one NYC open data set that you have used or are interested in using?
Okay, I apologize for my voice. Hello all, Inej, BetaNYC. I am a civic innovation apprentice with BetaNYC. And the data set that I ended up using the most is 301 data. And we use it to make maps, charts, lists, tables, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome.
Did I miss any question?
No, you got it. I forgot about your voice. I'm glad it sounds a little better than yesterday. Getting better.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to pass it off to Cora, if you're there.
Yes, fun. Still trying to get used to mute button. It's Cora from City Council District 1 for Councilmember Margaret Chin. It covers Community Board 1, 2, and 3. I'm trying to learn as much as I can because you have shown a lot of tools to use. I tried who owns the buildings, but there's still lots of buttons, click here, click there, a lot to explore. So it's really interesting, but I need this refresh course. Thank you. That's why I'm coming back, my 3rd time.
Awesome. We're so glad to see you again. I'm going to go to Cindy.
Hi, Cindy Cardinal. I work for Councilmember Helen Rosenthal, District 6, which is predominantly Community Board 7, a little bit of 4. I'm here because a couple of our staff members participated last week, and at our staff meeting, they raved about the presentation. So I'm here to check it out and see how great it is.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Thank you for joining us. It's nice to see you. All right, I'm going to go to Casey, I think.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Casey. I'm with Councilmember Miller's office. And I think I said this last week, I'm pretty new to council. So like data, BetaNYC, having these courses is kind of really helpful to see how like I can access certain information. And I'm looking forward to also using 311 data because it seems like in our office, we get a lot of constituents who call about different issues, and it's good to keep track of it. So that's what I'm looking forward to using the most. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, we'll go to Zachary. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what data sets you love?
Hi, everyone. Zachary Fader from the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. And I guess I'm here because I'm personally a fan of open data, but professionally help to manage the city's program around open data. And one of the important pieces there is getting feedback from people who are using it, but also understanding why people might not use it, the challenges people have with it, the questions people have about it, and really just making it easier for people to use and making it more valuable of a resource. I always sort of duck this, like, what's your favorite data set question? Because I have a lot of data sets that I like. I don't know if I want to choose favorites, but one of them that is, I would say, little known, but incredibly useful, and I use it all the time, is the data set of data sets. It is the asset inventory. So it's a data set that contains every data set that's on New York City Open Data. I just shared the link in the chat. And you can see when the data set was first published, you can see the agency that owns it, you can see when it was last updated, you can find a link to it. So it sort of gives you a menu of what's on open data, and from there you can continue to explore.
That's such a great data set. I love that there's a data set of all data sets. So meta. Awesome. Z, do you want to tell us, you already told us who you are, but tell us more about your data sets.
Hey, I'm Z. I'm really interested in open data. I think what got me into originally working for BetaNYC was the vast knowledge and the amount of tools that BetaNYC kind of teaches folks and kind of exposes. I never knew there was an open data portal originally, and also like all these various other tools to manipulate the data and understand it in the context of New York City to make it a better place. One new data set that just popped up that I'm very interested in exploring is the school attendance for 2021. So like the overall attendance rate for the school, but also the amount of attendance for remote students, blended learning students, and then students that are that were in person, kind of. I'm not sure. I'm still trying to like unravel this whole entire large data set here. Yeah.
Okay, cool. There's always new data sets sort of coming in. Actually, did that mute me if I muted on this? And
what?
All right, never mind.
No, you're unmuted.
Yeah. So sorry, we have like a few different tools here that we're using to connect.
But if you mute yourself up there on Zoom, then you're muting the
phone.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's always fun new data sets being added. That's the exciting part. So I know we had a few new people join us, and I also let's see. Well, Craig, do you want to introduce yourself briefly and let us know what data sets you're interested in using?
Sure. My name is Craig Caruana. I'm the legislative director to Councilmember Robert Holden, who's chair of the technology committee. I guess I first got into open data, looking up data on the homeless in New York City, which, is a very big issue. And then 301 data sets is always interesting. We're told, I'm not even sure if this is still true, but we're told our council district, the 30th, has the most 311 calls of any council district in the city, which I completely believe, because we certainly get a lot of constituent calls on quality of life issues. So that's always a good one. And then there's a great webpage you guys turned me on to in the first the first session 2 weeks ago that kind of broke down every neighborhood. I forget the name of it now. I got it saved somewhere on my favorite pages, but it breaks down every single neighborhood in the city, and it tells you by demographics, income, ethnicity, everything. It's like everything you'd ever want to know about that neighborhood, not just council district, but by neighborhood, which I thought was really interesting. So that was a pretty cool page that I learned about from this session. So looking forward to what I'm going to learn in this one.
Oh, awesome. Was that the population fact finder?
Yes,
perhaps?
that's it. Population fact finder. Yeah, that's the one.
Cool. Awesome. All right. I guess I didn't tell people to pass it off to the next person, but so I'll just keep going. So Cynthia, I think you just joined us. We're just asking who you are, why you're here, and what's one of the NYC open data sets that you have used or you're interested in using. or you wonder if there is a data set about something. And if you're not there, we'll move on to, I think, Tanya, you also joined. If you'd like to come off mute and introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks. I'm Tanya Paget. I'm the communications director for Councilmember Barry Grudenchik, and I'm interested in all kinds of data, in particular homeless data, and any data that has to do with like open spaces. I guess it would be lots for like, I don't know, green opportunities. I'm not quite sure what data set I would find that under. Land, I don't know. But I love it all. I'm a technophobe, but I love information. So I'm trying to connect those two, and your classes have been helpful in me taking those steps in that direction.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'm sure you're in great company as a lover of information and eager to learn more with technology. So who have I, besides my colleague Noel here, who have I left? Oh, Joseph. Let's go to Joseph. Or maybe, okay. And then there's also one person on the phone. I don't know your name, but I just see your 646 number. If you would like to come off mute and introduce yourself, please do.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Ian from Councilmember Cornegie's office. I'm really interested in board stat and learning, and just generally learning more about how open data can be useful. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. All right, Noel, to you.
Hello, my name is Noel or Noel. I'm here because I'm one of the people who advocated for the city's open data law, and I think it saves us a lot of time and energy instead of having to file all these different various FOIL requests. So I'm here to understand how you want to use data and how we can work together to make open data more useful. And the one open data set that I have used or that I'm interested in using that I use quite heavily through a website called howsmydriving.nyc is essentially the parking ticket speed camera violation data set. There's this developer, Brian Howell, who has created a very simple website that enables you to look up any type of parking violation or speed camera violation through that data set. And as someone who's really concerned about safe streets, I take photos of cars that are blocking sidewalks and crosswalks and curb cuts or in the bike lane, and then see whether or not they're really arrogant drivers. And come to find out, there's a correlation there. More times than not, someone who's disregarding safe streets, kind of like traffic pattern, has speeding camera violations or is an obnoxious parker. So, yeah.
Very interesting. All right. So, did anyone not get to speak or introduce themselves who has not? Has anyone not gotten introduced himself who would like to? If so, please come off mute. If not, I will keep going. All right. So I think some of you have already attended a class in the past 2 weeks, but just a quick overview. BetaNYC is a civic organization improving the lives of New Yorkers through civic technology, design, and open data. We work to help improve digital literacy and open data for all across the city. So we have a curriculum that we teach classes around, and we run a fellowship program with CUNY students throughout the year. We hire on graduates from that program as apprentices who work alongside our staff in our Civic Innovation Lab, which Z and our colleague Emily help run. They build tools, they respond to requests for help like research and data assistance requests, where they respond to people's needs. It's a service that council offices, community board offices, community-based organizations can use to get our help to create maps and build tools with open data. And then we run events like NYC Open Data Week, which we do in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics every year. And we run are just sort of engaging people in open data and having and teaching them about it. So that's just a bit about what we do. And now I'm going to quickly hand it over to Zachary to introduce the open data program and it's sort of how it works.
Thanks, Kate. Again, Zachary Fader for the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. And we work, I guess if you go to the next slide, on data analytics projects, sort of with different city agencies working almost as internal consultants. So some of the larger agencies, many of the larger agencies, if not most, have their own teams that do data analysis work, but a lot of the smaller ones don't. And what we do is we work with them and we help to share best practices throughout the city, throughout different people that are doing data analytics in different places. We also have a team that works on data operations. So that's making data available, making sure that we're sharing responsibly internally. And then the third thing we do is that we work on the city's open data program. As Kate mentioned, we co-host with BetaNYC now for the last 5, soon to be 6 years, the city's Open Data Week, which is a festival every March that celebrates both the anniversary of the city's open data law and open data. And then jointly manage the open data program with our colleagues at Do It, the city's tech agency, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But you can see more about the work of MODA at large at our website, nyc.gov/analytics, or at the project library that's linked here. Kate, if you go to the next slide. So yeah, as I mentioned, open data is jointly administered by us in our office and by staff at the city's IT agency, Do It. And together, we administer this program. We help to set rules and policies. We make sure that agencies remain in compliance. We help to share data and work on making data more usable and having more people aware of it. But really, a lot of the work is done by this network of open data coordinators throughout city agencies. So I think that's on the next slide. I could be mistaken, maybe not. So if you want to take, that's fine. If you want to take a look at the city's open data yourself, you can go to this website. This is the longer URL, but the easier way to get to it is nyc.gov/open data. It'll take you right to the site, and you'll be able to see a landing page of, and I know you had this tutorial a couple of weeks ago, of what the different data sets are, some of the most popular data sets by agency. And really, as this picture indicates, it's a representation digitally of the physical New York. So for every object you can find, every city service you can see being performed, there's pretty much an analogous data set for almost all of those that exist on the city's open data site. But again, really, this would not be possible without these people who are responsible for taking the data, finding it within their agency, creating documentation for it, restructuring it so it's accessible for people to use, working with us to publish it, and then in many cases, helping to promote use of this data. Many times, like the city planning, they make tools that make it easier to use. So the population fact finds that we were talking about before is something that city planning has both for their own staff, but also for anyone else who wants to better understand demographic data around New York City. So that's a bit about open data. And I think we'll talk a bit more about some of the questions you have, but a few ways that you can get involved in open data, some of which we've talked about before, some of which might be new. But you can submit a project to well, first of all, you can visit the open data site, but if you go to the next slide, you can submit a project to our project gallery. And this is projects that use open data to answer a question or to explain something to people. We've recently updated the rules to move away from, originally it was just a contest or a series of contests where there'd be like an event that we would have, and now we're taking submissions continuously. And so really, if there's anything that you're doing with open data, if you're creating a map or a visualization, and you'd like to share that story, we're always interested in seeing what people are doing. And you can find some of the tools that I think are discussed in this presentation or were discussed on this page. And if you go to the next slide, you can ask us a question, and that includes everything from, I don't understand what this data set is, how do I use it, to I think there's a problem with this data set, there's something missing, to I would like a data set, but I can't find it, I'd like to request it, to I'd like a training on open data. And if you have enough people, we'll be able to either connect you to BetaNYC or be able to do a training ourselves. So we're always interested in hearing from people how they're using open data. Oftentimes these questions that we receive through here will go to the agencies that own the data. And again, it's these open data coordinators who would be answering detailed questions about an agency data set, just because there are so many different data sets. If you include all the different types of assets, including maps and data sets and other assets on New York City open data, there's over 3,000 different data assets that are available. So we understand, like we have a broad understanding of all of them, but really the deep expertise is at the agency level. So when there are questions that come in about a certain data set, we work with agencies to answer those questions as thoroughly as we can, as thoroughly as they can. And if you want to read more about our work and the open data program and see a bit of what we've done in the past, but also a bit of what we're doing now, you can check out last year's open data report, and that's available at this shortened link at the top of the page. Also, if you go to the NYC open data site, again, nyc.gov/open data, there's a little banner or a little image to click and you'll be taken right there. But you can look at, I think most notably, 2 years ago now, and in celebration of the 10th anniversary of the city's open data program, we convened people from within the city. We convened people who use open data, people who advocate for great open data access, a variety of different viewpoints and different uses to share their feedback on what the next decade of open data might look like. And through that came up with a list of 27 initiatives that we're now working on. And we'll be updating in September, actually, this progress, so you'll be able to see more. But again, if you have any questions about the work we're doing, happy to talk about it now, or you could always ask us a question through the contact us feature on the open data site.
This is Noel. Thank you, Zachary, for all of that. I will add that the successive open data reports are really great for you as council staff members to understand how the program has evolved. They're not, we're not talking about hundreds and hundreds of pages here, but they're great reference material to see how the program has evolved from being one which is just about meeting the letter of the law of local law 11 to becoming a full-fledged transparency and accountability program that also is really rooted in civic engagement and making sure that New York City's information broadly is shared with the general public and is done so in a way that is accessible on a spectrum of access. And so, just flipping through the report itself gives you, is a great way to make open data tangible. It's also a great way to look at agencies that if you go back through a few years, you'll be able to see agencies that essentially haven't published their data. Hopefully, we hope that some agencies like the Department of Transportation and a few others are kind of like more forthcoming when they publish the data. But the reports are really great ways to kind of look at agencies and to see which ones have not published or have published data sets. So I highly recommend these reports.
Yeah, and I wanted to add, the project gallery is a great place to view some of the tools that you might find helpful in analyzing open data or using it. So like Crash Mapper helps you find information about vehicle collisions. Sidewalk Widths is a cool project that looks at all the sidewalks widths throughout the city and sort of analyzes where sidewalks are wider and narrower in which neighborhoods. And boundary maps, for instance, is a tool we made that looks at all the different political boundaries across the city and lays them out over each other. And yeah, so I guess if there's not anything else, Zachary, that you had in conclusion, we are going to move on to questions. So I'm going to say, if you have a question, you can post it in here to the slide.do/askopendata, or else you can come off mute and ask it. To sort of get ourselves thinking about open data, we have some commonly asked questions that we'll just run through. Some of them are new ones, and I figure I will ask them, and I'd love for Zachary, Z, Inej, Noel to respond to them. So the first one, Zachary went over a little bit already, so maybe you want to just expand on it if it's helpful. Who is responsible for publishing open data, and who holds those people accountable?
I can certainly start. I'm sure there are others who have more to add on this one as well, but any city agency is responsible for publishing open data. And that includes larger agencies, that includes smaller mayor's offices, that includes elected officials' offices. So the city council has its own open data coordinator and publishes its own data. The borough presidents have their own data. It also includes quasi-city entities. In some cases, the MTA publishes their data through New York State, but we still have it available for the public. And there's a whole host we have over 100 different open data coordinators. There's actually a data set of open data coordinators at every, again, agency and office that meets this definition of city agency. And as far as holding them accountable, I think there's what I would call a layered approach. First, the open data coordinators are people who understand and use open data, and in many cases evangelize for open data. A lot of them work in data analytics within their agencies, and it just makes their lives easier having this data be accessible and available. Anecdotally, one of the largest groups that uses open data, and I'm sure this is no surprise to you, is the city's own staff. So oftentimes the open data coordinators will meet with different divisions and different division heads to make sure that they're publishing what they're supposed to be publishing. We also work with the city's, again, the city's IT department do it to make sure that agencies are in compliance. There is a law in New York City where we're somewhat unique in that respect, where advocates and legislators got together to enact legislation around open data. So it's not an option, it's a requirement, it's open by default, as Noel was saying. And with that, we work with open data coordinators throughout the year, but also as we were discussing to work on this annual compliance report once a year to make sure that agencies are releasing what they're supposed to. And we take a look at what they do release outside of open data in a few different ways to ensure that they are sharing everything that falls, or as much as possible, that falls under the definition of open data under law. And then, of course, there are advocates like BetaNYC, there are legislators, there are external people from around the world who are interested in using open data and can request data sets, and that's also a very important accountability mechanism as well. And before before I turn it over to others who I'm sure will want to weigh in on this question, there's a question that came in through the chat that I'm happy to answer, Kate, if that works.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you it. Thanks for that question, Cora.
Yeah, I believe it is the city council as a whole that's required to publish data. I don't know if any of you know Brad Reed. He works in the central office of the council, and with that is responsible for the council's open data. And if you have any questions about what's being published, he's definitely the person to talk to. But oftentimes, well, I think one of the nuances around open data is that it's not just data that you have or data that you use, but it's data that you maintain. So for example, we in our office use data from the US Census all the time, but we're not actually taking, it's not as if like every month we take the data and we do a certain thing to it to make this new data set that's based on the council data. So we don't release the data because we're just doing analysis on it one-off, let's say. And that doesn't count as open data because it's just something that people would use for answer a particular question, and the question's answered, and you really wouldn't use the data again that same way. By contrast, the city's Department of Planning, the Department of City Planning, uses the census data, but has products that they make from it. So every whatever regular basis, every month, let's say, they have a certain analysis they perform for their own work to support agencies, to support demographers, and they release that data because by taking this information and changing it and maintaining it, it becomes open data. So there's a bit of nuance there that may be the reason why council members, by and large, and I'm not the expert here, you know far more than I do, wouldn't have their own open data necessarily, but it is released centrally through that central office.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So the next question is, does every NYC agency have open data? And Z or Naj, would you like to answer that one?
I think we answered this question last week, but just really quickly, also Zach can probably answer this question way better than either of us. But yeah, each city agency has a set, it's to my understanding, a set open data coordinator that will decide which data sets can be published to open data or what sections of open data sets can be published. Zach, please elaborate on that better than I.
Are there any agencies that don't have, because this kind of goes with the question of, is all city data open data? So like, are there any agencies that have data that just absolutely is not like made for the public or something?
Sorry, is that a question for me, Kate?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. So first, to elaborate on what Dave was saying, yes, there is a legal requirement for every agency to name an open data coordinator. So once you meet the definition of the agency, then you have to have an open data coordinator, whether you have data or not. But there are, as I mentioned, quite a few agencies that don't maintain data themselves. They don't have databases. They don't have like data engineers. They're just taking data and using it. Again, a question comes in from a constituent and they look at this data. They look at someone else's data. They answer the question. They may never use that data again. So if they're not maintaining data actively themselves, and that's for really like these like small offices, a lot of the elected officials' offices that are small, a lot of the city agency offices that are smaller generally don't have their own data. Our office is actually a pretty good example of this. We're the Office of Data Analytics, but we use other people's data. We work with other people's data. So we don't really have that many data sets of our own. One of the main ones that we have, as I mentioned, is this data set of open data coordinators, but by and large, we're using data that other people have already published from other city agencies. And as far as agencies that don't have that much data, if you think about, I guess one of the types of data that's not published is internal administrative data or private data. So things like data from these agencies have some data, but as you would expect, like a lot less. So like the city's law department doesn't release a whole lot of the data that they have because a lot of it is quite private about city employees. The city's Office of Payroll Administration, they release, I think, a very well-known data set of city staff and how what their compensation is, but they don't release details that they have otherwise. They have all of this personal information, all these personnel records that are responsible for city staff getting paid, but they're not going to release that publicly.
Yeah, awesome. We just had a question. All right, there it is. So I'm just gonna start asking other questions that people are asking to sort of intersperse them through. We haven't received too many on the Slido that are new, so if you have a question, we can just use the chat. That's easier. So is all data entered on open data foilable? Who would like to answer that? It's already on open data, so.
let me see if I can answer this, and then Zachary, I'd love to see if you can correct me on this if I'm wrong.
Trivia.
So all open data on the open data portal would have been accessible via the FOIL, the Freedom of Information Law process, but not all FOILable data is on the open data portal. There are some agencies that either the data set is too large or they haven't kind of put it through a batch process. You know, FOIL is a discoverable process to look at information. There are some data sets like building data, which has very comprehensive data products that the Department of Buildings shares openly, but not all of that data is on the open data portal. So there's, you know, building data is accessible, permit data is accessible via website, and it's pretty comprehensive and pretty transparent, but it's not on the open data portal. But it is, you could use the Freedom of Information Law to get access to that data in bulk or have more detailed research on that data. You know, all data on the open data portal, FOILable. So to answer your specific question, Casey, it is yes. But there's some data that's out there like wedding registry and the city clerk's office doesn't have its information on the open data portal.
Got it.
Yeah, I would agree with, I think, pretty much everything you said there, Noel. But please actually don't FOIL data if it's already on open data. I mean, you're welcome to do so. But one of the great things about it being on open data is you don't have to FOIL it. It's accessible to everyone. And if you FOIL it, there's a fair chance that depending on the agency, you'll be sent right back to open data. With that, the open data just makes the FOIL requests available to everyone. Actually, one of the components of our annual reporting is for agencies to list out the number of FOIL requests they have, how many of those FOIL requests contained data, and of the requests that contain data, which of those requests are on open data currently and which are not yet on there. And for those that are not yet on there, when will they be on there, or why can't they be on there? So the presumption is if you're sharing it with one person, then you should be sharing it with, there's no reason you couldn't be sharing it with everyone. And as Noel mentioned, sometimes why that doesn't happen, at least immediately in the short term, is because of the complexity of data. But really, agencies are supposed to make everything that meets the definition of open data public. Sometimes it takes a long time because of just how complicated these underlying systems are. You're talking in some cases about mainframes that are 30 years old with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of different fields that all have to be reviewed before the data is published, and all have to be structured in a way that makes sense to people before the data can be published. So that is one of the FOIL in some cases will get you access to a data set more quickly, but for a comprehensive view of the data that's not just a narrow piece, open data would contain all of that.
Got it. And Z has put in, and we've put in some links to the FOIL requests. You can check them out in openrecords.nyc.gov. So we have another question from Cora. When people call local precincts directly, are those calls incorporated into the data set when doing reporting? And how much work does it entail for an agency to compile those records? Calls are?
Police data is one of the more opaque pieces of information in the city. So you will see some of that data when, I assume when you talk about precincts, you're talking about police precincts. You will see some of that reported in the CompStat precinct reports. The granularity of that information isn't as fine as we want it. we being the advocates, you know, the NYPD is very particular about the type of information that they want to share with the general public. And it comes out a lot in kind of disparate reports. So yeah, whoever Z is throwing the ComStat, I want to take a look at that, because sometimes the NYPD only kept it to like federal, but there's been some greater granularity. The ComStat sadly isn't as refined. There's also, you have to really go to the NYPD's precinct page, and I will find an example of that and throw that into chat. And that's where you'll find precinct desk calls reported.
Interesting. Okay. Anyone want to add on to anything Noel said?
If you want to ask, engage with that question directly, feel free to just come off mute.
Okay. Yeah, if anyone else has any follow-ups, feel free to raise your hand or come off mute. So
I guess just to quickly answer the second part of the question, I was hinting at this before, but for larger data sets or for larger agencies, even for smaller data sets, it is a lot of work to publish. Before I went to the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, I worked for the New York City Parks Department for 11 years. And one of my responsibilities for part of that tenure was the Parks Department's open data. And oftentimes there's first the conversation with people to explain to them what open data is. Then there's the discussion about what data sets they have that might be classified as open data. Then there's the technical process of making sure that you have access to all of the data that comes from the underlying system. Because again, what's on open data is not just the extract or the report, it's all of the database that feeds the things that people are using. So for example, when you're looking at, I'm not quite getting a great example in my head right now, but for really any system that you're using, you're looking at some report that is like designed for a particular use. And that report is generated by a specific set of instructions that the computer carries out on the underlying data. And the underlying data is what's published on open data. So there's a process of looking through that underlying data. As I said, in some cases, it could be thousands and thousands of different columns and fields, and evaluating essentially each one of those columns. One of the main things that we do, that open data coordinators do, is make sure that they are not releasing anything that could result in the identification of a particular individual or any like internal or private information. So that there can be comments from like one employee to another that make their way into a record, and those sort of things would be exempt from FOIL and things that we try to not include on open data generally. So there's a review with the, every agency has an agency privacy officer to make sure that private information about individual New Yorkers doesn't get released on open data. And the other thing that happens here when an open data set is created is there's a series of documentation that's created as well called a data dictionary. And that exists to essentially translate the complexity of whatever operation that the data reflects to a lay audience. So communicating all the information to a member of the public. So there's information about the data set as a whole, and then also information about the individual columns within the data set.
Yeah, so I'm just showing, you can still see my screen, right? So I'm just showing you an example. So a data set that I was going to walk people through later to visualize some charts. This is the data dictionary of that data set. And like Zachary said, you can see all the information about that data set in it, which is great. Cool. So another question, which is a popular one, I think, what are the best open access programs to visualize the data so offices and constituents can make sense of it? So we have tools that we like using. I think I mean, Z, you might be Z and Inez, actually, you both may have the best sort of answers for this. My answer is sort of, it depends on what data it is, how you're visualizing it, what you want to do with it. But Z, who does this all the time, please share.
Yeah, so again, I think last week we showed the visualize tool in the open data platform. It's Kate, if you can go to it, in every data set, there's a visualize button right next to the view data button, where you can quickly just throw it into either the main tool that Socrata provides or Plotly. I never tried the Plotly tool, but yeah, and here you can filter your data set first. So you can limit it to a certain community board, after certain dates, and then you can select how you want to visualize it, be it a bar chart, a pie chart, a line chart, even a map sometimes if the data set has geo coordinates. And from there, yeah, it's really simple. And if you're logged into the open data platform, I think you can save this view and share it with other folks. And you can also export it as I think an image. But yeah, Zach can talk more about that. What I like doing with the data set is I pre-filter it, I download the data as a CSV, and I throw it into Google Sheets where I can run something called a pivot table, which combines a ton of functions where I can see the data in different views. And then from there, I typically try to visualize it in there. If it doesn't look that great, I use another tool called Datawrapper. I'll share all these links in the chat. Datawrapper is a fantastic tool to make all your charts and even maps look really beautiful and stuff like that.
So here we have, this is a data set about indoor environmental, indoor environmental complaints. So here we've visualized using Socrata on the open data portal, and we've chosen a dimension, which is basically the x-axis, and we've put council districts on the x-axis, and we have, we're measuring the count of rows. Every row is a complaint, and so the number of rows would mean the number based on the filters you have. So we've filtered down to just the asbestos complaint types, and between last summer, last July, and today's date. And you can see it's in ascending or descending order along the x-axis, and you can see the number of complaints per council district. So yeah, so that's one way. And then yeah, and then you can save these visualizations and log in and sort of create a sort of collection of visuals for yourself. And I guess it would update based on the date and stuff.
We also have recorded classes, and I think maybe in the future we'll have additional classes on how to kind of use the basic functions in the open data platform. So it's sort, filter, and group by, or it's called roll up here. And with those functions, you can then ultimately use pivot tables in Google Sheets if you're not familiar with pivot tables. I can try to find one of our previous courses and share it in the chat if you're interested in learning more about pivot tables.
Yeah, and then I think we introduced it last time, but and it was acting a little funny. We've since fixed it, BoardStat, which was acting a little funny last time. So here's BoardStat. So this is an example of a tool that our organization has created, and there's a bunch of different tools people have created to analyze specific open data in specific ways. So like Crash Mapper I mentioned before is all about collisions, traffic collisions, vehicle collisions, and BoardStat is all about 311 data for community boards. So if a community board wants to investigate 311 data in their neighborhood or in their district, they can go in and do that. So like, let's see, so you would choose your community board, and then you can filter by a date. So we'll say like from the beginning of 2020, and you can choose a complaint type, you would deselect that one, and then, what was the one? Oh, still not working.
Well, it only loads a couple hundred complaint types, and I need to figure out why that's.
Okay, well, we'll figure that out.
It works better if you start filtering on the second page rather than the first.
Okay, well, we can get back into that then, I guess. But so there's tools for visualizing things without you having to actually design the visual. So it depends, I guess, how you're going to use the data. If you're doing weekly reports, you might want to create a bar chart that you export and then put into your weekly report. If you're just trying to find a quick answer on the number of complaints, you might go to a tool like BoardStat to sort of find that answer and report on it. All right, back to some questions. So I saw another question. Let's see. Best open access. And then when city comptroller or the AG publishes reports quoting 311 data, do those data sets include calls that are placed directly to agency or local precincts? Publishes reports quoting 311 data. I don't know. When publishes reports quoting 311 data, do the 311 data include calls that are placed directly to agency?
So this is a very interesting question. When you talk about interagency accountability or auditing, comptroller or attorney general may get access to data sets that are not on the open data portal. Some of our conversations with the state comptroller and the city comptroller are to actually ask them when they do their audits to identify how exactly are they getting that data. Are they using the FOIL process? Are they using a special power, administrative power that's granted to them by the charter, or through a legal discovery process that it may be through the Attorney General's office? And so interagency accountability or legal oversight may differ than what data is published on the open data portal. And so, read the fine print in those reports to find out exactly where they're getting that data. Once again, if it's interagency data that's being shared, there's a good chance that you might be able to get access to it, but the general public may not be able to get access to it. It all depends upon where the data is coming from and what personal identifiable information is in the data and what type of data sharing agreement may have been written to govern that data sharing. Zachary, do you have any other insights on that?
I think that is a great encapsulation. Yeah, I think you covered it all.
Awesome. Great. So let's see. I think those are all the questions in the chat. And I'm just looking. So there's a few different things we could do right now. We have a whole bunch of questions that have been asked at previous sessions that we can run through. Or if you would like us to show you a tool and run through like some 311 data or use the open data portal, we're happy to do that. So, or if you have more questions, by all means, come off mute or post them in the chat. But otherwise, maybe just let us know what would be the most helpful to you right now. Is there a data set that you're interested in exploring right now? You have some expertise in the room that we can definitely make use of. What were some of the data sets people were saying they were interested in 311 data before? At the beginning, who else said? Nobody? Casey, yes.
I don't have one at the moment, but maybe you could share one that you use regularly.
For visualizations or data sets? Going through?
Data sets.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I'm gonna ask, let's see. Oh, thank you, Craig, thanks for joining us. And that does remind me, I have to, yeah, so let's see. So maybe we can go, Z orNej, would you like to share your screen and show and go through board stat perhaps, and we can show some 311 data sets, and whoever wants to, if you want to like volunteer a community district for us to look into, or a complaint type, if you can do that in the chat. Casey, if you want to share the community boards in your district, feel free to do that since it's your question. And I will stop sharing my screen. Z orNej, would you like to walk through board stat with everyone?
I still think board stat's a bit too buggy to run through, but I can propose a separate tool that's pretty useful. And I think someone posed a question about open space or vacant land in some certain districts. And let me just share my screen really quickly about that tool. So Department of City Planning has this data set called Pluto. So Pluto kind of displays all the various land use with additionally information about who owns that plot of land, and I think what is it specifically zoned for. But Pluto is generally very hard to kind of access. So what what the Department of City Planning created was Zola, and essentially you just load into this map. You can disable certain layers you're interested in seeing. In this case, let's first of all let's study a certain neighborhood. Anybody can like suggest a certain neighborhood or a city council district in the chat. That would be great. So if you scroll down to the bottom here, you can enable New York City council districts, and from there you can see it pops up. I'm going to also just disable the various other layers here, so it won't be that complex. So any suggestions on any city council district to look at? I see CB12 and CB13 for, I think that was for board stat. But yeah, okay. Let's go to 27, I guess. So load 27, it's here. And from that, we can then start enabling layers. You can enable the zoning district layers to see how your area is kind of zoned. And if you're ever confused about what a certain zone means, you can click on here and it'll launch this side tab to show you more information about like what an R2 is, what that kind of permits, what FAR is allowed, et cetera, et cetera. But we're kind of here to see where vacant land is. Pluto is updated, I think, yearly, and then there's semi like updates throughout the year to correct for small amounts of information. So if we actually zoom in and we enable this show land use colors, we can see that it pops up with a ton of different colors. So if we're interested in vacant land, you can see vacant land is gray. So we can click on this really huge gray plot. I'm just thinking this is probably owned by the MTA or whatnot. So when you click on here, you can just go click on show owner, and they'll show you what the owner is. So in this case, it's unavailable owner. We know this is vacant land. And we kind of also know other stuff like the size, the lot, and like when when a building was last built on it. In this case is 0 because there's technically no buildings on here. So this plot is not very conclusive of what it is. So you can always click on these other links here. So Biz is the Department of Buildings tool to show you if there's any alterations, any building permits on this lot. Acurus actually shows you the tax information. So if you click on Acurus, you can probably figure out who owns the plot more more in-depth information than what Pluto or Zola had. So in this case, this is owned by the MTA since there's a lot of train routes going out of it. Let's try to search for a plot that's in a more like residential area here. Here's another vacant land plot. Click on there. You can then see the owner once it starts loading. sometimes it's a bit slow, but you can always just wait a bit. Here we got the owner. We can still go in Acris to find more information again, or we can go to BizWeb to see if there's any ongoing development on the slot. So if we go here, we see that there are 2 buildings on the slot. There is this main address and there's a garage. We're interested in the main address. Sometimes this happens, and let's see how to fix this. Sometimes just refreshing a lot just fixes it. There we go. And from there, you can see there's complaints, DOB complaints, there's job filings. I'm interested in job filings. We can see that this building has been approved for a new building in February, and it's been, I guess, granted until then. And what the next steps I would do in researching is probably look at the street view. There is actually a more updated street view that Zola and city planning and also the larger New York City agency provides. It's called Cycle Media. Click here, that will give you a more updated street view than Google Street View, which is great. So it's somewhat updated, but yeah. So this is how that lot looks in April. And I guess that's it for one of my favorite tools. Any questions on this tool, or if you want me to go to another tool, I can show you another tool.
Thanks, Sue, that's awesome. I know somebody was mentioning who owns what before. Do we want to check out who owns what with you for a quick second?
Yes, yeah, sure. Who owns what? All right, I guess we can look at this lot, or like how I usually start using who owns what is when I'm interested in a certain building that has a lot of complaints. So maybe I'll just start a board stat in community board 12 of Queens, and then we can move from there and kind of explore who kind of owns that, like most complaint building in that area. So I'm loading a board stat. I'm going to Queens. It's gonna take a bit. My internet's slow. Let's see if it loads. If it doesn't load, there are other tools to kind of explore this many issues of buildings in New York City. There we go. First of all, I'm gonna filter for my boards. In this case, board 12, Queens. I can filter for complaint type. In this case, I might be interested in what's a really popular building complaint that you might get from your constituents. Or Kate, do you have a suggestion for a complaint to look at? Abandoned sites.
That's a good one.
Okay, we can look at abandoned sites. I don't know the specific. Yeah, I don't know the specific 301 code for it.
Vacant building complaint?
Okay. Let's see if it exists.
Or abandoned property?
Vacant lots, vacant apartment, maybe. I'm just going to enable both of those. And then we can go to explore map and kind of see how that kind of goes, is in the district. So there's a lot of these complaints. Because I didn't filter out down the date, let's filter down the date to this year, I guess, so 2020. And we have only a few complaints for actually these 2 years. So let's kind of look at, let's look at this property here, I guess. So we can hover over this. This is 120 33 Smith Street. So we can then bring this over 120, 33 Smith Street. There we go. We can click there, and then we can find who owns this property. So sometimes their property information isn't included in who owns what. So we kind of have to go to Acris again to figure out who owns this property. So in this case, this is a private owner that probably got its the mortgage recently from Chase in 2016. Normally we would not really search on vacant properties using who owns what, because we want to find if there's a linkage between bad land or buildings that have bad landlords. So another like really good selection I would do is I would actually go to probably P2 to view by community board to see top complaints. And sometimes heat and hot water issues are an indicator of a bad tenant that does not fix a bad landlord that doesn't fix their pipes for the tenants. So those are usually a lot of issues around heat and hot water. So let's show you a look at bad property for that. Heat and hot water. Or even an elevator. I think elevator is relevant sometimes for accessibility issues. So in this case, there is this really huge plot here really large amount of issues at this property. Okay, I've got a example in the chat. So thanks, Cora. So 271 Franklin Street. So I'm going to just copy that over to who owns what, type that in. And in this case, there's two addresses. There's one in Manhattan, one in Brooklyn. This one is in Manhattan, so we click on that. And from there, we can see who owns this lot. So, so in this case, there are actually 4 landlords for this lot that we can learn more about. You can toggle this to see where their corporation is or where their agent is, so you might get in contact with them. Another thing that you can do, which is really important, is that you can link this property with other things. So if you go to portfolio down here, you can see what other properties this set of landlords own. And I also have another example in chat, but let's go through this really quickly. So you can see that we're focused on 71 Franklin here. There are 8 units, and the total amount of complaints, there aren't many complaints in this property, but maybe near related properties that are owned by the same landlord have been having this like a small amount of HPD complaints. There are some HPD violations for both of these, and it seems like this landlord is the most complaint person of all of those. No one lives in 71 Franklin. Okay. Corey, do you just want to hop into do you just want to hop into this chat? I mean, chat via like audio instead, so we can try to figure out what you want to learn from who owns what better.
Yeah, feel free to come off mute and tell us more about the spots that you're choosing.
Does it echo?
Yep, try again, I think. Hopefully there isn't an echo.
Oh, sound problems. Oh,
Okay.
okay.
That's perfectly fine. We can just look at another building, I guess, and yeah, just let us know in chat like what issues you're having with who owns what, because we're in contact and we work with Just Fix It, who maintains the tool. So we can go to this property here, and yeah, you can see that there's a ton of landlords in this building. There's even like an internal street view, which is kind of weird. But yeah, in the side here in the map, it also shows you what associated buildings are associated with those landlords too. So we go to portfolio again, we can see that, yeah, it's the same, yeah, landlord that you're talking about.
Cool.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, so we only have a few more minutes, and I know I personally have to run to a meeting. So are there any final questions? Okay, so which tool shows rent regulated units in a building? Is that part of the DAP?
ANHD, yeah, DAP portal. So DAP portal has, I think, a few. Yeah, let's go there. So I'm gonna share my screen again. The proper tab. There we go. So you can type in address. So I'm going to use that same address before. There's also a DAT map, which allows much more better view of your district if you're interested. So in DAT map, similar to any other mapping tool, you can enable city council districts, so you can see what specific council districts there are, and you can zoom into an area. So let's zoom in an area with relatively a lot of like issues with deregulation. And here you can, in the side, you can switch the views of the different colors. So in this case, right now the redder units is areas where there are units lost in, I think, rent regulated units. So in this case, it's like probably a really bad building, which is really red here. And we can see here that in 2007, there were 5 rent regulated units. In 2019, there were 1 regulated. So there has been a large change in rent regulated units in this, rent stabilized, my bad, in this building. We can go to another one, we can do that. This one has a lot more rent stabilized units, so in this case 85, and in 2019 that became 38. So there might be a ton of issues in this building, and we can kind of explore that with that portal. So if you click here to that portal, it'll show you what's going on in that building. So in this building, there has been a ton of recent sales with varying amounts. We can also see if there's any martial evictions, if there's any HPD complaints, maybe the landlord's not fixing units that are stabilized because he wants to kind of move those tenants out or whatnot, and kind of view that in that portal and also in the DAT map. So that's just a really quick overview of this tool here. And it provides you with a similar link. Cora asked in the chat, does this mean people can also search that portal for rent regulated units when they're looking for housing? I don't think you can use this tool to search for rent regulated units because the way that the data is updated is that there's only data for 2007 and 2019, because how they kind of collect the data is from a tool that they built out to scrape out, I think, tax records. And that doesn't get updated as frequently to help people find rent regulated units. So there might be a different tool out there for that.
So thank you so much, Zeke. So I think that we need to wrap up in a few minutes. If you have any other questions, you can ask them on the open data portal, like Zachary was pointing out before. You can get in touch with us. If you have any specific maps or analyses that you need to do, we have a service, and we have worked with council offices, community board offices. We work with the borough president's offices and community-based organizations to help you fulfill needs around like mapping data in your district, understanding whatever it is. Z can tell you more about some of the radars that we've done, or we can point you to some summaries of them that we've done. But I'm going to post the link in the chat, and definitely feel free to use that if you have questions or need help doing something like that. And then yeah, if you're interested in hosting a class where we go through some of these tools a little bit more, or creating a data journey where we talk about an issue and then show you different tools to use to investigate that issue, we would be more than glad to schedule that with your office this fall. So don't hesitate to get in touch. You can reach me to do that at kate@beta.nyc. And then the last thing, before we say thank you to everyone, is, I don't know if we want to talk about the People's Tech Assemblies, but we just launched an initiative called the People's Tech Assemblies, where we're bringing people together in communities to talk about tech and how it's used in government, and how people would like to be used in government, and hopefully come out with some actionable insights from community members around future tech policies and legislation and use and applications of technology in government. And so we're holding these assemblies virtually, online, and would love to host one in your district if you would like to help us set one up in your district. We're trying to reach as many community members as possible throughout the city to have a broad range of perspectives and sort of use cases of people who have experience with technology and who don't. So I guess if there's no more questions, thank you so much, Zachary, for joining us today. It was really awesome having your expertise and insight into all the back ends of open data. It definitely brings another perspective to the room that we don't normally get. Thank you, Inej and Z and Noel, and thank you to Councilmember Holden's office for helping us host these, the Committee on Technology. Would anybody else like to chime in and say any final words?
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, council staff, for attending. Thanks, Zachary. We're here. If you have any questions, let us know. We're always looking for fun things to work on.
Hi. For the open data, the open hours doc, are we gonna have access to that even after the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
The open hours, the materials, the class materials.
The Google Doc. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I will, yeah, and I'll be sure to send all the materials, the slides from each class, and that doc that I shared with you, and I'll share a PDF as well, so that's easier, with all the tools that we went over in the first class. And yeah, like I said, if you're interested in another class, because I know that first class was a lot of information and a lot of tools, let us know and we can schedule something to sort of go through the basics of data and spreadsheets and tools. We'd be happy to set that up. And yes, we'll follow up with all the materials, and you should have access to them for however long. Any other final things before we get going? No? Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cora. So glad to know that. It means a lot to us. We'll pass on the word to the rest of our team. We appreciate everyone being here. All right.
Thank you.
Elevator music.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks to the Beta team,
Zachary.
and thanks to everyone who came.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys.
Bye. All right. Thanks, Z. Talk to you later. Thanks, Inej. All right. And